had a roller coaster over the last couple of years, right? Just life, business, the industry shifting, and the world is changing faster than ever. And so I think it's just important sometimes to slow down and get back to the heart of the things that matter most. Um, Today's conversation is going to be very focused on slowing down and being purposeful the last 3 to 4 weeks of the year. The opportunity that we all have. How many of you feel that your clients kind of take a breather the last couple weeks of the year, right? You have a little bit more space than you do in other times of the year. And so it's so important for us to just use that time intentionally, obviously spend it with family, with the people that we care about, and also get a little bit more intentional around how you want to operate your business in the year to come. So I want to kind of go through a final reset for 2026. And I'll start with this reality that most people never stop long enough to choose the life that they're living. It's a reality that oftentimes we get so caught up in the speed of life, right? I don't know if any of you lived in the 90s. I know there's some of you who don't know what that era means. But it was a lot less busy. At least it felt like, right? I was born I'm a 90s baby, and cell phones came out when I was in maybe middle schoolish timeline, as far as like having cell phones, but they didn't have social media and all the craziness on it. It was basically text message and calls. That's all you could do. And it was limited. Do you guys remember when they used to count your text messages, right? And you have a certain amount of text you could do every month. Times have changed. But now it's like you have an endless to-do list. You have distractions at every turn. And I think even more so, it's so important to build that skill set of planning, presence, slowing down. It's really becoming an art. And another way to say this is that most people plan their vacations with more intensity than they do their actual life, right? And so I want to walk you through this process. And how many of you have heard this story before, the tortoise and the hare, right? Classic story. And I think it's important. And actually, I think it relates to us in business. We have over here the 6 personal perspectives. And number 3 is moving from E to P. What does that mean, moving from E to P? Those who have been with us, moving from entrepreneurial to purposeful, right? So this idea is that by nature, most people who get into real estate are very entrepreneurial at heart. They've thought about maybe running their own business or being in sales, and that's why they got into this industry. And then what you end up realizing is that you are limited by time, right? We all are. The only way to break through that ceiling, that naturally, we call it the natural ceiling of achievement, is if you actually flip the switch on saying, I'm going to be more purposeful with how I actually operate my business. Okay. The old way, or the entrepreneurial way, is I will work however long it takes to get the result, right? And there's people who've worked 60, 80, 90, 100 hours a week to achieve their goal. And the purposeful way is saying, well, actually, I can get better results in less time if I use leverage, systems, models, right? So if I actually just work smarter, I can get a better outcome. And so we have to, in this approach, take the last part of the year to get very purposeful and say, how do I want to adjust next year so I can actually work less, but earn the same income or more income? And that, I think, is the secret question to ask ourselves, is how do I do more in less time? So most people run the business like the hare. They're fast, reactive, and exhausted. And the tortoise didn't win because it was slow. It won because it stayed consistent and purposeful. So the E to P is the same shift. It's choosing to slow down on purpose, build structure and systems, and run your business with intention. That's the small shift. Makes a massive difference on the back end. Before we get into that conversation, because that's what we're going to talk through today, just a little recap on the strategies we walked through. Who was here at our sales meeting last Tuesday? Raise your hand. Perfect. Only a few of you. So we talked about negotiation strategies. So that's why I wanted to throw them in here as a recap. We had a conversation around how do you influence, right? Negotiation is all about influence. And we talked through 6 different principles. Number 1 was that in order to influence somebody, you have to know what? What already influences them, right? In other words, their motivations, their drivers, their pain points, what they're motivated against, right? So to influence someone, we have to understand what already shapes their decisions, what they think, they feel, and they value. How do we actually find that out? We ask, right? We can find out through questions. And so the best negotiators that I've seen are people who ask phenomenal questions, right? It actually provides a lot of clarity around what the driving forces are for the person on the other side. Who do we negotiate with in our business? Everybody, right? So we talked about last week, you negotiate with inspectors, you negotiate with appraisers, with lenders, with your clients, with your spouse, with your kids. You're always negotiating, right? Or a better way to say is you're always influencing or being influenced. Number 2 was to anchor with data and not emotion. So the best way to actually help people get behind an idea is showing them the facts, showing them reality. So don't try to negotiate or persuade through emotion, use data. So lead with facts, comps, and logic to ground the conversation and reduce emotional swings. Number 3 was to separate the person from the problem. So it's never me against you, it's us against the problem. That's one of the core strategies that you can use is keep it us versus the problem, not us versus each other. And this removes blame and keeps negotiations productive, especially when you are negotiating with the agent on the other side of the equation, right? So it's very common that in the world of sales, so not just real estate, people can feel this energy of I'm going to win, you're going to lose in this negotiation, right? Or I'm going to win, I hope that you can find a win on your side. The best energy that we can bring to the table is I'm going to find a win-win solution for both parties, right? Which is not one of our 6 personal perspectives, but one of our core beliefs here at KW is win-win or no deal. Next was offer options, not ultimatums. So give clients an option to choose from. This is great. Does anybody who was there last week remember the actual example that we broke down for this? Where is it so helpful to use options in today's market?
Listing a home, the purchase price.
Yep. Pricing strategy, right? We're in a place where clients tend to decide a price based on what? What their friends sold their home for 7 years ago or 3 years ago, right? During the boom. And they don't base it off of reality. But one of the ways to get them behind an idea is recommending 3 different price strategies. And the language you use around those pricing strategies matter. And so, but at the same time, giving them an option and saying, hey, here's the 3 best options I think that you guys can choose from. Number 2, obviously, in my professional opinion, I think we'll give you guys the best outcome that you're looking for. But you tell me, which one do you feel like is best aligned, right? So giving them an option rather than just saying, here's the price that I'm going to recommend and giving them only one solution. Next is to reframe repairs through long-term value. This is actually slightly off. It really is about reframing or just framing in general. So framing, we talked about, is how you set the tone for a conversation. And so a lot of the framing can come back to data. It can come back to, why you are. What was the example that we used last week? I'm trying to recall. We used a couple for framing.
Frame repairs, like that you said,
Oh.
like.
Yeah, that's right. So we used repairs, and then we also used price reductions. That's becoming more common right now, right? How many of you have had a price reduction this year on a listing? How many of you anticipate you might have to have a price reduction in 2026, right? So the 2 ideas that we talked about is if on repair side, if you frame it to the client, your buyer's agent, and you say, hey, we're going to go do the home inspection. This is what the process looks like, you're always going to find something wrong with the home. Any inspector, and that's by design. But what we're going to negotiate is for any life or health safety items to be taken care of. Okay, that's what we're going to go to bat for. All of the cosmetics, those are just natural, they're normal, it's a part of the game. But what we want to do is look for any life safety or health safety items, and that's what we're going to negotiate on. So if we plant that seed 2 days in advance, and you send an email stating that, hey, just as a reminder, here's the items that we're looking for as life and health safety items, is it far less likely for your buyer to say, hey, I want them to repaint that little chip on the wall, right? Because you've properly framed the conversation around what they should be looking for, okay? Same thing with the listing agent on the other side. If you're negotiating with them and saying, hey, my clients are only asking for the life and health safety items, it's harder for a listing agent to push back on anything that should be tied to somebody's health and safety, right? And then giving them an actual breakdown of what the cost is for repairing all of those items. So that's another negotiation strategy, is just framing. And then lastly is framing your price reductions. So having that conversation in the listing appointment, okay? Here's how we determine if a price reduction is needed. If we see X amount of showings in 2 weeks or this many days, you have to decide kind of your schedule. We're going to reduce the price, okay? Or I'm going to recommend to you that you do a price improvement. And again, language always matters. So I just corrected myself if you caught that.
Yeah.
I don't tell them we're gonna reduce the price. I just say I'm gonna recommend a price improvement, right? So just kind of get clear with your negotiation for 2026 on some of the strategies you want to get better with. That's going to help you get a better result with your clients. Last one is to protect the relationship more than the deal. Okay. So relationships, and this is going back to that win-win or no deal, relationships above all. Relationships is the number one thing. Even if it's an agent who's not at this office, you want to make sure that they walk away saying it was a phenomenal experience working with this person. Because likely, how many of you have done a deal with an agent multiple times before, right? And there's going to be situations where maybe you're the buyer's agent on one deal, and then you become the listing agent, and you want to always make sure that the agents who are offering are doing their highest and best, and that they are also going to try and find a win on the other side, and they're going to do that based off of their experience with you. So always do your highest and best to find a win-win and protect relationships. Deals and relationships compound, stay professional, calm, and focused, and on collaboration. Okay. So that's just a little recap of what we went through last week. We went through a little bit more in depth, but this reality for the business, I want to kind of just reset the tone of your end of year business planning process. So all of you have this little checklist in front of you. And if you don't raise your hand, we'll make sure that we get you one. And there should be some on the back. If we run out of those, there's more in the back. So most people work for 40 years and they never stop to ask why they're doing what they're doing in the first place. Or in other words, we tend to turn on autopilot in life. And that's actually where a lot of pain and regret comes down the road, is when we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, 10 years have passed or 20 years have passed. And we ask the question, have I done what I actually wanted to do? Or did I just turn on that autopilot button and kind of coast through life, right? And I don't know about you, but for me, KW in this industry itself has provided a ton of value, where in a lot of industries, they don't do this kind of stuff. They don't do this like weekly recharge of how do we help reset on your goals, your strategies, your life, your business. They don't talk through how can you plan out the next year to get the most of you, the most impact that you want to have. And so for me, I'm just super grateful for the KW ecosystem, where like this is just, it feels natural for us, right? But if you actually walk into other ecosystems, it's not normal. And so too often we turn on autopilot. And one thing that I want to express for 2026 is to focus on actually doing less, but doing things better at the same time. Or in other words, doing the right things. So how many of you have a to-do list? either a digital to-do list or a paper one that you write down stuff on? Okay. How many of you have way too many items that seem to never get crossed off that to-do list, right? And I want to actually tell you that it's okay to not do things on your to-do list. And it's actually better to say, I have a to-do list and I have a success list. I will do the things that are on my success list. And if I get the chance or I have the extra time to do the things on the to-do list, great. And if not, it's okay. Not the end of the world, right? So it's not about doing more. It's actually about being purposeful. And one of the greatest strategies that you can deploy going into the new year is actually removing things from your to-do list, removing things from your life. Like, what are those things that are not actually moving the needle in the direction that you want to go? And again, that's more about being far more entrepreneurial than purposeful. I'm going to share this video, and then we'll dive into this checklist, and I'll kind of go through each segment. But let's go ahead and play this, and we'll dive in.
So if you see the world through fresh eyes, like if you can let yourself just take in your surroundings in a way that can shape your perspective. You see your home, you see the car you drive in, you see the food you eat or the water you drink or the education you had, and you recognize how that pathway was built. When you actually take a step back and see it all, you recognize that it all happened because of one incredible thing: work. This idea of work, that over time, layer after layer, hour after hour, effort after effort, people can build this life that we all live. We're the only species that does it. We're the only species that has shaped our experience, and we do it through work. It's such an extraordinarily powerful gift. Our life expectancy has increased more in the last 50 years than it did in the 200,000 years before that. Over 1 billion people have lifted themselves out of poverty over the last 25 years. That didn't just happen by accident. That is years, generations, whole lineages of people doing their best, working their hardest to get us to a place where all of this stuff is now possible. We've got computers, we've got smartphones, we've got ways to communicate across the globe, ways to travel across the world with such ease. These incredible things didn't just appear. They happened over time. They happened because of work. Being able to use your greatest ability to solve somebody's need and to keep escalating your specialization to get better and better at something specific that you have autonomy over or you control, those things are deeply satisfying for people. They unlock the potential of work. And then recognizing how the efforts that you put in day after day, year after year, how they don't just build your life, but they matter to the people around you. When we start to see that connection, again, we tap into the potential of work. By unlocking the potential of work, you start to solve the problems in your life, and we start to solve the problems that we collectively experience. You're still so conditioned to see your life a certain way. We've got all these rules built around work. You do it from 9 to 5, or we do it for 40 years, or we do it to earn a paycheck. All these things that feel like they're quite natural. But when you step outside of this day and age, this country, this culture, lots of people do it in different ways. There's a whole new set of opportunities if you let yourself see them. The reason I study work, the reason I'm fascinated by work and push people to make changes because it has so much potential. It's one of the ways you can alter your life. And changing your experience of work doesn't take anything you can't give yourself. You don't need a promotion. You don't need a title. You just think differently. You do differently. And then difference starts to appear. You know, my passion about work doesn't come from a love of work in particular. It comes from a love of life. The approach to try to figure out how do we build a great life. And then we recognize that work is the thing that we get to do for 40 years. Most of us get to do it for 40 years. It's the one big lever we pull to make a mark on the world, to improve it. Humans deciding to wake up and build, wake up and grind, wake up and push to make things better. Your work is your time. It's your efforts. It's your abilities used to build this great life we all get to live. Step back for a moment and see it for what it is. See it as the way that you shape your life and shape the lives of other people, not just now, but in the future. Work is powerful. So if you see the world through fresh eyes,
Thank you. What did you catch in that short clip?
I think we almost need to rethink the word work, right? I mean, work almost has a negative connotation. If you think about it, and when you're okay, when you're productive, you're working, right? That's what feels good. And yet somehow we feel like, yeah, it's just like the 9 to 5. It's like, oh, I gotta be done with work. But then you just switch gears and it's productive in something else. So I don't know. It seems like we need to reframe the word work and call it something different because it's awesome. Really.
Yeah, Sheila, I love that.
Yeah.
Work is something we get to do
Yeah.
to make the world better.
Hmm. What's that mean to you? Of the world?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I do have a thought. You want me to
Cool. Yeah, Kylie.
Do the same, but kind of the same earlier, so how everybody works.
I think everybody works whether they realize they are or not. In some way, it's about infusing the work with intentionality and purpose. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying about giving yourself permission to slow down. My question after that to Jordana was, okay, how does this guy monetize studying other people working? Right. But for him, I think this is what he's chosen as his purpose, and he's intentional about how he does it. So I don't know, just kind of my thoughts.
Yeah.
So I really like work, like a lot. Like I found that out when I was in high school. Like I wanted to do more pull-ups, and I did something simple. I just found a spot in my house where wherever I walked by it, I'd do a pull-up. And then after a while, I was doing 2 pull-ups every time I walked by. And like just those small pull-ups throughout the day, like one day I was trying to figure out how many I could do. I did like 20, and that was like pretty impressive. So like I found like, just doing those small things throughout the day, little like work, like they have the biggest impact on like what you want to do.
Still can't do a pull-up.
Yeah, I think it comes down to this like question of why do you do what you do? Because for a lot of people, why do they typically work? They have to, right? It is actually tied to like, I have to put food on the table, or I have to XYZ, and therefore I have to go to work, right? So what is the level of love towards their occupation typically when that's the driving force? Is it have to? Tolerate. Not fun, right? They tolerate it. And for most of you, did anybody get forced into real estate? You're all crazy ones that just decided this is a good path to get into, right? Yeah, Jared was forced. Like, the cool thing with real estate is already it's a little different because you actually do not have to be in this industry and you're not guaranteed a paycheck every week. So there's already something else that is some sort of driving force for you. If you were at the goal setting retreat that we did in November, we talked about the human needs. Does anybody remember the top 3 human needs or driving forces? So if you actually look at humans and you actually identify, we all have these needs, these driving forces. The lowest one, and not lowest in priority, they're all important. They're all necessary. And they're all needs, everybody has them. But the one down here that's the base or the foundation is certainty, right? So that's typically why people get into a job, is because they need some certainty of, I'm going to put food on the table next week for certain, right? I'm sure of it. And yet, if that is the driving force, if that is all these priorities can be arranged in different orders. And so part of it is we have to get clear around which order are my needs, and also the people in my close circle around me, what are their needs that they're trying to meet. So love and connection. What's the next one? Yep. Significance. And then variety or uncertainty. So we need all 6 of them. But what you'll find, if you actually ask yourself, my business goals and how I show up in the day-to-day of my business, which of these needs are driving me on a day-to-day basis? For oftentimes, it's usually significance and certainty. Those are the most typical drivers for people. And at some point, sometimes we shift into this purposeful state, and you say, actually, like, my needs are met, or I actually don't want to have certainty or significance as like the driving forces. I would rather focus on impact or growth or love and connection. The cool thing is, in real estate, can you hit all 3 of these top goals? It's an industry that provides the ability to do all 3. Some industries do not have that opportunity. So a lot of you, when you say, I love the real estate space, or I love what I do, it's actually probably because you value one of these needs, or 2 or 3 of them, and they're part of like who you are. So why I'm diving on this is because one of the things that he talked about is he said, we need to escalate our specialization in our ability to solve problems for other people. We're in an industry that I think solves a pretty dang big problem for people, right? As they're navigating this emotional roller coaster of buying or selling a home. And the question, though, comes to how are we elevating that client experience and how we do what we do? Because the reality is not all agents are created equal, right? In the value that we deliver to clients. But if you just say, you know what, in 2026, I want to be a little bit more purposeful and intentional around what my core driving needs are, that could be a good starting point. And we just need space to define what is the purpose, why do we do what we do, what's the driving force, and that in itself provides a lot of impact for you. So we're going to go through these in the next 10 minutes, different areas. So this sheet is one that we actually went through last year. We've done a little update on this, which is just a recommendation of like set 2 hours aside, either on a Saturday or a Friday afternoon, when you know you can have some undivided attention to just say, let me go through the different areas of my life, my business, my wealth, and recalibrate, okay? And so this is simply just a checklist. And this is really just helping you to reset and close out with clarity for 2025, but also build momentum going into 2026. So Gary Keller, he says that success is sequential, not simultaneous. So it's a series of small things that lead up to a significant achievement. And so all of these things are just small areas of your business that oftentimes are foundational in your success, or they're good metrics. They're good things to measure. So number 1, I'm going to just kind of go through each section. We're starting on the page that says end of your business checklist and reviewing your business performance. So getting clear, we kind of did a little bit of this in the business planning clinic in November as well, which is let's just analyze your business, right? How did you do with listings, with buyers, with GCI, your gross commission income year over year? What is the report called that we provide you with that's very helpful here at KW to look at your numbers? Amber? Your multi-year trend. Okay. So we actually track the data for you. If you just go to mykw.kw.com, mykw.kw.com, it's in command now. Does it still look pretty like the old report, or is it? Okay. Okay. So you can find it in command now. They've added those. I know they had, when I first checked it out, the layout did not look as pretty as it does in the actual reports portal, but you can find it in 2 different ways, which is awesome. So we keep track of all your numbers, and we can show you year over year, month by month, the breakdown of buyers, sellers, how much commission you were paid, everything. So we do track that, which is very helpful. Review your client feedback to identify the causes of wins and losses. So get feedback. Did you have any transactions that did not close out this year? Did you have people pull off the market? Did you have buyers who went cold on you? Like, analyze those situations and ask, how can I actually improve that area so it doesn't happen again next year? But also this idea that success leaves clues, right? So your success has left some clues, meaning if you actually inspect what caused me to be successful this year, were there certain lead generation tactics or strategies that I deployed, or any changes that I made to my business? And if you get clear about those, you can replicate them easier in the year ahead. So getting clear about what caused your success. Assess the effectiveness of marketing and advertising. So this comes into the MREA, where we have to hold every dollar accountable and say, did I get a return on the investment of either my money or my time in this marketing area? And if not, I'm going to make some adjustments. I'm going to make some shifts. And then evaluate the return on investment of leverage, systems, admins, and tools. So what things am I spending money on in my business, and am I getting a return on that investment? Prepare your end financials for your CPA. Obviously, that's an important one. Do you have a system for that, to where you can walk in and get really have kind of your tax package already built out and prepared? How many of you have a year-end conversation or call with your CPA as a 2026 or a next year planning process? Okay, a few of you. So that's another great one, is to say, hey, here's where I'm at income-wise. Is there anything I should do to tweak in the last 3 to 4 weeks to make sure that I'm properly prepared? One example is last year, my CPA recommended to do what's called tax loss harvesting on some crypto. Crypto's volatile, right? And so that was one of the recommendations they said is, hey, let's lock in some of these losses that you've had, sell the crypto, and then buy it right back. And so since we did that in basically right after Christmas, like December 28th, we locked in a bunch of losses, even though I was able to retain or keep the cryptocurrency. So it's good to have a CPA who actually helps you plan. They're not just somebody who files your taxes, right? They actually help you plan for the year ahead. Pay kids if applicable. That's another tax strategy. Review insurance policies and shop for improved rates. There's a lot. Johnny talks a lot about this because he used to sell insurance, and some of you might have heard his stories on this. But you always want to audit your insurance and just make sure that you have the proper protection in place for vehicles, for your houses, things like that. Even rental properties. 2 years ago found I actually had a bunch of rentals that I moved into different LLCs, and I never added the LLCs as an additional insured on the insurance. So the properties were not in my names. Luckily, nothing happened, right? There wasn't a fire or crazy occurrence that had taken place. But if I hadn't done this audit, I would not have caught that, and I would have had that liability, massive liability. So it's just good to audit your insurance and see what needs to be tightened up. Preparing your business for the new year. So this section, just set targets, simplify your plan, and decide how you're going to run your weeks. So planning is bringing the future into the present. So this is just more of a kind of a goal setting process. Some of you have been to the retreat this year. You've been to business planning clinic. So we've gone through a lot of this, but just make sure you kind of dot your I's, cross your T's, and get your plan in place before you run into the new year. The one that I would say is the most important is decide the tracking system you're going to use. Oftentimes we set a goal, and it's very common that people will not check in to see if they're on target with that goal. for 6 to 12 months. So they won't actually say like, hey, have either a weekly planning or at least a monthly ritual of looking at their numbers and saying, am I on track for what I to do? And if not, what slight adjustments do I need to make to get back on track? This goes into kind of your finances, is your financial cleanup and expense optimization. So a leaner business is a stronger business. Remove noise and tighten your margins. Your business succeeds in proportion to the number of unnecessary things you eliminate. So again, this goes back to that idea that I shared, is a lot of success that I found is not about saying I'm going to add more things to my plate in 2026 or the next year. It's what do I have to remove? Part of that is removing unnecessary expenses. So cutting the fat or getting rid of the things that are not essential for your business. So one easy way to do that is go through and tag your expenses. So print out your all of your expenses from maybe the last quarter and go through and highlight them. This is how Gary Keller recommends it, is you have 3 different color highlighters, and you might have a green for keep, right? Or mission critical. You have like orange for useful but not required. It's something I could cut if I need to. And lastly, I'm going to have pink or red or something that is saying, hey, I need to cut this immediately. It is actually not an expense that's necessary for my life or my business. One other strategy, if you have excess cash, as a tax strategy, is prepay for things that you're using. So if you have, especially like technology tools, a lot of tech tools that you're using, they'll give you annual discounts, right? So if you're saying, hey, I use ChatGPT or something, right? Go and look at their platform and see, okay, maybe if I switch from monthly to annual, I actually can get a tax write-off, right? But I also save maybe 20% because they give a discount if I pay for the annual plan on this platform. So just look through those before the year ends. That's a way to minimize the tax bill that's going to be coming. Life and business operations. So review any important documents, so property insurance policies, we went through that one, but also other things like health insurance, your estate plan. Just make sure that those are all tightened up. Again, this is all about saying, hey, this time of year is slower. I'm going to use it intentionally to just kind of do a life audit, right? And really dig into my life and business. And then finalize your calendar for the next 12 months with the important items. Your personal vacation time and family commitments come first. And then schedule key business growth events and reserve time for personal development and training beyond that. Lastly, this is one that we've added this year, is just review your tech stack. More and more, it's becoming important to just say what AI or automations can help me to do more in less time. And so just get clear about what tools you're using and or which ones you should be upgrading in 2026. You've got your wealth. We'll fly through this just for time's sake. Actually, is lunch coming, Cameron? I'm going to point at you just because you're back there. So, okay.
Should be.
Okay. I heard tacos are on the way, so we'll actually just pause for a second while we're waiting for that then. So reviewing your wealth and investment portfolio. If any of you are investors, which our hope is that all of you become investors, some of you may be further along on that journey, and it's important to just kind of have a little checklist to look at your portfolio and say, how can I either grow my passive income or just tighten up my investments for 2026? So number one is update your fair market value for all investments to determine net worth. I used to, in the craziness of like 2020, 2021, 2022, I would do this every single month because property values would go up how much back then, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. Now for me, it's more about quarterly, but at least if nothing else, do it at least once a year. So if you have a personal property or investment properties, just go ahead and look at the fair market value and have just calculate all of your net worth. So your assets minus your liabilities. Evaluate the return on investment that you're receiving on those investments. So the cap rate, cash on cash return, one of them that's important is your cash on equity return, your COE. So that's one that I had a mentor. I had a real estate investment coach, and he was going through my portfolio. This is maybe 6 years ago. And he said, well, why do you have this property still? So I'd had it for 5 or 6 years. And I said, well, because the cash flow is awesome. It was like 12% cash on cash return. And so he's like, well, how much equity do you have? And we had probably $220,000 in equity in the property. And he said, well, if you deployed that $220,000, somewhere else, could you get a better return than the 12% cash on the cash flow that you're getting? Because cash flow, that calculation is determined on what? How much money I put in, right? So I was calculating 12% return on the 45,000 that I had put in. But if I took that, so I was getting roughly, I don't know, at the time, let's call it 6,000. But if I took that 200,000 and put it somewhere else at, like, let's say 10%, which is less, how much should I get in return that year off 200,000? 20,000. So 6,000 in cash flow or 20,000 return somewhere else. Which one's better? Right? So that's where you, at some point, your properties have a tipping point where you have to look at the cash on equity return and reassess if you want to keep that property or transition it into something else. So these are just some good metrics to go through. Simple productivity jumpstart. The last page or the last little box is define your January monthly goal. So at minimum, just say, what do I want to do in January? That's going to keep me on track for my 2026 goal. And then identify the three most important projects to complete in January. So where do you need to focus on your systems, on your clients? Who are the top clients that you want to focus on and spend energy into? And then identify the one habit to start and one habit to eliminate for the year. And lastly, set your first weekly planning session. So that is the one thing that I think is the lead domino for all of this, is having a time block where you plan your months. So you just say, what am I going to do this month? How did I do in relation to my goal for the quarter? And I'm going to reassess and kind of adjust. And if you just do that monthly cadence, you have 12 times to get back on track. Okay, 12 times to make adjustments. And it's very hard to have a bad year when you're making that kind of intentional approach to your business. So with that, we have lunch. Thank you, Cameron. He went and figured it out and just snapped his fingers and it's here. He does. So we wish you Merry Christmas. We're so grateful for all of you. We appreciate you. We'll have the talent show next week, and you don't want to miss Dean's talent. All right, he's been practicing something. So have a great week. We appreciate you all. Thank you.